Well, Alex, I was intrigued by a few aspects you mentioned during the main panel. One was the fact that of the practical challenges of sharing data. Okay, so let's take a bit of a practical angle. I guess now we can also maybe dare to be a bit technical or use some technical terms, but at the same time explain them now as we go. In your experience, what are the key challenges? Can you elaborate a bit on this aspect, please?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start around just the practical challenges of sharing data. So I think that the other panelists can focus quite heavily on like the more political, how do you get people working together? But the reality is that there's also really, really practical challenges to this data sharing problem. I think that if we start right at the lowest level, when I've worked inside financial organizations, it's even sometimes challenging internally to be able to share data. So we kind of start there a lot of the time, trying to create a common language within an organization where we have real well understood definitions of, you know, maybe bank accounts, but also people, organizations, and so on, so that at least you're starting from a point of view where your data is in such a state that it's ready to be shared. I think then we move on to actually what can you do when you want to collaborate with external parties? And that's when the GDPR question kind of pops up. And there we've got quite a number of options, some of which we might have discussed in the past. But if we start with the common ones, the first one that people often jump to is some way of anonymizing or pseudo-anonymizing their data. So what that typically means is that you create or you remove any personal identifiable information from like financial transactions usually, and you might put those anonymized transactions in a centralized place where the other party is able to do the same thing. That would be how you might collaborate with two banks. But once you start looking at collaboration between public and private sector, then you have another challenge, which is how do you actually join data sets that don't have a common key? So when you're looking at finance to finance, you might have this bank account number or an IBAN that you can use. But when you're looking at something like police records and internal bank accounts, you start to have to look for what we call like more complex entities, such as people or organizations. And there's not a really direct way to link them, because typically it might be that they share a name or they're registered at the same address, or we recognize that the director is involved in one organization and another organization. And so you have to do what's known as more fuzzy matching. And more fuzzy matching poses challenges when you want to anonymize data, because you no longer are able to kind of see how similar a name might be, for example.